Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Anything is Possible webinar. My name is Paul Cheetham, and for those of you that don't know who I am, I own a group of finance companies that started out in Manchester and is across the country now. But I have a podcast, Taking Care of Business, and I wrote a book which I brought out last year, which of the same name. So that's me. Today, I have with me the founder, chief exec of Make Events and Holly Moore Events, Holly Moore. So thanks for joining me, Holly. And I have the CEO of Manchester Central, Shaun Heinz. So thanks for joining us as well, Shaun.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So we're going to try and keep this to an hour. I mean, we could talk for quite a while on this. It's obviously very topical at the moment, but we're going to keep it to an hour. We're going to talk about where you guys was heading pre-coronavirus and what normality looked like. We're going to talk about what you've done and how you've pivoted. And of course, we're going to talk about the hospital, which you've obviously been involved in, Shaun. We're going to talk, Holly, about how you've been able to flex your business, which is, mainly around virtual events. And then, of course, what we're going to talk about is what we see normality looking like till the end of the year and then into next year. So that's how it's going to go. There will be a Q&A. So anybody listening, put your questions in the chat. We're going to try and do that from about 1:45. And as I say, we are going to keep it to an hour today if we can. So first of all, Shaun, do you mind just giving a brief intro for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, good morning, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Shaun Heinz. I'm chief exec of Manchester Central. Actually, just about 3 years in. I was away on holiday, actually, 3 years ago. To the day, on this very poignant day in Manchester, actually, 22nd of May, as we all know. And that was my sort of entree into the job that I then took on about a week later. And it's an incredible business. We'll talk about the business as we go. But prior to that, I came into it from a background of property, hotels, apartments. And there's a couple of principles that are kind of very similar, really, which is that when you're in the hotel business, you're interested in, your occupancy and your rate, and you can apply those same principles to the space that we sell at Manchester Central. So I didn't come from a specific event background or venue background, but I had some, I guess, what you'd call transferable experience and skills in that area, and joined the team, and it's been incredible, actually. It's as everyone in Manchester knows, I mean, it really is it's an institution, like a few of the things we've got in Manchester. It's part of the fabric of the landscape. It's such a well-known building. It features in all of our skyline images that we have as a city. And I feel very proud to be the custodian, if you like, of this great facility that's been there for 140 years and inevitably will be there for many more. And so this brief period of time that I'm looking after it, it's wonderful, and it's such as we'll talk about, it's such a diverse job and presents us with all sorts of really challenging situations, but also some really inspiring situations as well. So anyway, that's me.
Thanks, Shaun. I mean, you said yesterday when we had a chat yesterday morning that it's 14 years since it changed its name from the GMEX. I still can't get away from it being the GMEX. Sure, many others don't.
We had some fun with that, actually. We try really hard to promote. The thing about the GMEX is the GMEX was only part of the building, and it occupied a time in history that's really valuable, actually. And many people have got incredible affection for concerts they went to at the venue back in those days. And even today, if you look online and you search for it, you'll get all people talking about stuff that's going on, stuff that went on, in the venue when it was concert hall. But of course, the change to Manchester Central really is first of all, it reflects the history of the venue, because ultimately it was Central Station originally. And it was the coming together of all of the facilities. For those that know, originally we had the exhibition hall and we had the International Conference Centre, and it was when we joined them all together and we redeveloped part of the space to create a single level complex, convention centre. That was really when the name came. But like for many people, changing the name is going to be tricky, and my mum still calls British Telecom the GPO, and that ain't going to change. So I think we respect and we're very proud of that heritage. And in fact, many of the people online will know about the Bee in the City initiative that took place a couple of years ago. We ended up acquiring a bee, and we called our bee BMEX as a kind of, just as a gesture and a nod to the history of the venue. And it's a key part of the personality that we have in our space, for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out how it's been for you over the past few months and what the future looks like for the venue. Holly, do you want to give us a bit of background on you, just a brief introduction?
Yeah, so obviously I founded Make Events 8 years ago this summer. We're a creative communications events experience agency based in Wilmslow, but delivering events mainly across the northwest of Manchester, but in the UK and overseas as well. We also have a smaller business that's probably not as well known because we keep it a little bit under the radar, which is HM Events. So we do like luxury private parties, garden parties, house parties, weddings, etc. for those people that would like to splash a little bit of cash on things like that. So I think the reason we were quite keen to bring Shaun into the conversation is one of our brand values is anything is possible, and certainly my story relates around that. And when I was thinking about all the businesses within events pivoting, I thought there was no more amazing story than Manchester Central, because in fact they've been forced to pivot in a way that would have seemed unbelievable 6 to 12 months ago. So I think we were all keen, and I think Shaun's got really positive spin on the industry where some of us haven't at times. And I think it'd just be good to have that conversation and maybe fill fellow event professionals and Manchester business people with some hope.
I think the real interesting part about this webinar is going to be the different take of you both. Obviously, you're from an agency side and Shaun from the venue side. So I think that is, that's what you aim to do by putting this webinar on effectively. So, Holly, you tell us where you was up to. January, February time. What was the business? What did success? What did the landscape look like for Make Events for this year pre-coronavirus, and then we'll get into that.
So we'd had a fantastic year in terms of brands we'd worked with. We've been working with like Twitter, Puma, MyProtein, really fantastic brands, real events that we could really be proud of. And February we just had the best team in place, real good mix of people in place. I've just noticed someone from the office is just, I'm just at a wedding. The alarm's going to go off. Oh. Sorry guys. This is lockdown. We were having a really good, we were forecasted, as you know, Paul, to have a really good year. 2 weeks before lockdown, the team had relaunched the HM brand to me, which we were for the private party side, which we're about to go live with. And we had quite a good recruitment plan for the year, looking at giving more meat on the bones to the management team, I suppose. So yeah, we were in a really, really good place. Nearly fulfilled our pipeline on the books, and yeah,
things were looking good. Shaun, what about you? What does the landscape look for you like normally?
Yeah, so our financial year finishes at the end of March, right? So the period Jan to the end of March is our last quarter. And typically, it can be a bit of a mixed bag sometimes. Actually, as you come into January and February, the corporate business, the association business, it's not peak time. Certainly, the immediate period after Christmas. But I have to say, this year we were doing really well. We had a huge, compared to normal, we had a huge number of events in the venue. All sorts of different events as well, which we'll talk about. And we were on track to have, in the context, it seems a bit glib, but another record year. We had a record year last year, and we were about to have another record year this year. I mean, as it happens, we ended up finishing okay anyway, because the real impact of COVID didn't start to manifest itself really until the sort of second week of March. So we literally had that last 2 weeks just to get through, which we managed to sort of do. But we were really busy. We'd just done it. Obviously in December, we do a huge season of Christmas parties, 13 nights, 26,000 people, huge activity. Operationally, it's quite tiring for the team and for the venue. So we come into January, and generally we like to kind of ease back in, but this year it wasn't the case at all. We got cracking straight away. But we started to feel the impact of COVID. you know, relatively early on. And you know, there was, as the news stories built, as you know, events were thinking, oh Christ, what does this mean? And we saw what was happening in Italy. Obviously, we saw what happened in China. We saw Italy. We saw the news build and build and build, and it was heading inevitably towards this sort of this potential of lockdown. But of course, if you cast your mind back, it wasn't actually very clear. There wasn't real clear guidance about what you could do and what you couldn't do. There wasn't clear guidance about which facilities were able to remain open, which ones couldn't open. And it became very confusing, I think, for everybody. You know, event organizers were worried, and as a venue, we were concerned because technically we'd not been given an order to shut or to close. So we were saying, well, actually, technically, we can still provide the space and we can still operate the venue. But of course, it was becoming increasingly difficult. What I would say, just to wrap this particular bit up, is that we'd done really well. But of course, up until COVID came along, you know, our nemesis was Brexit, all right? Because in our industry, part of what we do for Manchester is we attract a lot of international events into the city, and that's good for investment. It's good for the universities. It's good for the profile of the city. And in fact, just this week, for those who are watching that are familiar with the ICA rankings, which is the international kind of ranking of cities for hosting international events, you know, Manchester has jumped up again another 11 places in the world, making us, you know, fourth most popular city, certainly in the UK for events. So brilliant, actually, brilliant progress for us. And the problem with Brexit was, amongst many problems with Brexit, but the international market was saying, well, you know, we're not sure about the UK. We're not sure about what restrictions might apply if our delegates and our visitors want to come in. Actually, we're not sure about the welcome we're going to get as well. This is real, by the way. I'm being honest with everybody. You know, we were fielding a number of inquiries where people were saying, we're just not sure international delegates, foreign delegates, are going to be welcome in the city. And you know, we were contending with this all of the time, and it actually had quite a large impact on the profile of our business, domestic versus international. And we'd taken steps to put more emphasis on UK business whilst we were going through this. And of course, now the prospect of international looks even further away because of measures such as quarantine and other stuff that we're going to go on to talk about. The return of international visitors, international delegates, associations coming into the city, you know, later on in this call, as we start to look at the future, I think that aspect of it is the furthest away at the moment. But you know, the long answer is, as people that do know me will know, I'm good at giving a long answer to stuff. That, you know, we were in a great place. We were very optimistic. We'd taken some really important steps to reposition the business for what was going to be this financial year was going to be yet another busy year for us. And then it all started to unravel.
Yeah. And it's funny, what was that actual pinch point like for you where, you know, we'd heard about it because it was on the news and it was in China. And I think when it was in China, it was far enough away for us to not think it's going to hit us. Or that, at least that was my thought. At what point did it really start to pinch with you? Yeah. And how was it in that position where, and I don't want to get all political here at all, but there was a point where venues, whether or the Premier League or whatever, decided to lock down well before our government made the decision to lock down, and actually certain things have decided to open up before our government officially gave the stamp to open up. So you must have been caught in that devil in the deep blue sea.
Well, I tell you, when it started to get real was when Mobile World Congress cancelled in Barcelona, because that event cancelled before the city put any measures of lockdown in. And I think what that did is it sent out this kind of shockwave through the industry. And actually that, you know, it actually led to some fairly, you know, difficult situations between the jurisdiction of Barcelona, the bars, restaurants, the government of Barcelona, and the organizer, the Mobile World Congress organizer, that they'd made a decision, and then potentially there was going to be, you know, legal ramifications of doing that. So that, I think, then triggered this shockwave, and then we started to see other stuff happening, and we got notification of other events that were starting to cancel. And then for me, when I think Switzerland was first out of the block with a ban on large-scale events. And the biggest event that they had on the cards was the motor show. And then when that cancelled again, that was ahead of anything that was happening over here. I think that's when we realized that, this was just coming our way. And we'd already had certain conversations with certain organizers. And we were getting to a point where we were looking at the calendar and we're saying, right, which of these shows are at risk? And, some we were starting to field a lot of inquiries for people that just wanted to postpone and move further down into the year, which inevitably, may prove to be a bit of a false start, because people that moved into, say, July, August and stuff like that, then those events are unlikely to take place as well. So it was a combination of that. And then foolishly, I tried to go skiing. And I went skiing the day that France went into lockdown. And it was a tremendous 24 hours, because we literally flew out on the Saturday, and we'd arrived, we'd got our stuff, and we were ready to go. We went to a bar, had a few drinks, went back to the hotel, just having dinner, and all of a sudden cried, well, the city's basically, France is in lockdown. The hotel manager comes and says, you've got to leave tomorrow. All the flights, you're looking at the flight app, all the flights. And anyway, that's another story. We got home, back in the office on Monday, and we just got to grips with dealing with the crisis that we were dealing with. So
real at that point. Holly, I'm hoping to catch you not in the midst of an alarm going off there, but
it probably, if it does, I'll just click on mute.
Okay, no problem. But what was it like for you? When did it start hitting? When did it cancelling, and did you start to get concerned about it?
It was really, so if I went into lockdown properly myself 9 weeks ago on Monday, so it was kind of about 11 weeks ago. I can't remember the days, but yeah, we were delivering events up to the end of March. We had a very busy January, as you know, Shaun, because we had a number of events at your place. So they were still happening that week when some agencies were talking about cancelling. Some were still happening towards the end of March, I think mid-March. But then, it all kind of unravelled so quick, didn't it? And I think there was a 2-week period when we were in the office when some of the team showed symptoms, so decided to work from home. We were all sitting down at 5 every day to watch the address, and it was like a slow unravel. And then that kind of last week was like crisis management, I guess. And again, same as Shaun, a lot of them were ringing saying about postponement. So the first kind of couple of weeks of lockdown was all about postponement, cancellations, venue, all of that. People thinking this is a 3-month thing. And then I don't know if I was in denial or what, because we closed the office on that Friday, and I remember saying to one of the girls, so we can't even see each other now. It was like a surreal experience, really. So we just very much over communicated that last week, but we did leave the office as a full team. That was how it was for April, certainly.
And like you say, like Shaun just said, there was a little bit of false starts, because there was people changing from April to July.
Yeah.
What does the landscape look like now? When's your next event booked in?
We have got no live events actually confirmed. So we had everything booked on the pipeline. So what they've all said is, we think we still want it to happen, but we don't know when. We had a very big event booked for August, and I'd kept saying, I think it was about 1,000 people outdoor event, and they've only just cancelled it this week, because I kept saying to the team, I think this is, there's no way it can happen. So what we've had to do, as you know, Paul, is we've had to almost predict a P&L on 12 months of no revenue, because at this point is a point that we didn't know how we were going to pivot or what we were going to do. And so on that basis, I felt like and this is why Paul laughs at me, because he's so positive, but I'm like, if I plan for the worst, then anything else that comes in is a bonus. But I need to almost keep this brand alive from A to Z, which in my head is 12 months. And if we can do that with no revenue coming in, then we're in an amazing position if we see it through. That's kind of how and that's my challenge.
If people was looking into our meetings, Holly, they'd think you was the accountant and I was the events agency owner, I'm sure. But so that's interesting, because I spoke to you not long ago, and you still had effectively there was hope, I wouldn't say confidence, but there was certainly hope of events in, I think, July and August, you said.
Yeah,
And
no.
not that you was saying that, but the client was still hanging on to see if they could get it in. But, you know, so that's been cancelled now.
Yeah.
And have you get booked in? What does September to December look like for you? And I'll ask you the same in a second.
I mean, like nobody will confirm. Nobody will confirm anything. So we, you know, even, you know, we've done Puma's Christmas party for God knows how many years now, and they just can't confirm because they just don't know. And I think everyone is so, you know, we've had new inquiries that started off that they might be July, August, and now it's kind of like we 100% want to work with you. If we're going to use an agency, it's going to be you guys, but we can't say when. And that is the conversation that I'm having. I mean, we had a big event booked, which is biannual event booked in Central for September, and not even like they're saying, well, we'll book it for September 21. They're too nervous to even do that. So, which is why, and I think, you know, I mentioned the private side before, I believe that the private side will start to come back quicker, and whether that is, you know, smaller garden parties or, you know, things like that, I think that side will come back quicker because there will be that that need to be with people when things are relaxed. But I think companies are so dictated by their health, you know, they're terrified of them being the company that goes forward first and then they have a you know, an outbreak. And also, obviously, a lot of industries are challenged. So is there the money there? You know, are people just, I mean, I know there'll be a lot of event professionals watching today. There is a feeling within the industry that we just write 2020 off. That, and I'm not being negative. That is literally, I'm actually being positive, because if I was being negative, I'd be like, well, we'll shut the doors now. I'm not. I'm saying I will keep this brand alive until events come back. And in the meantime, introduce other products and services to the mix. So that's kind of where my head's at the moment.
Well, I'll bring Shaun in a second to talk about that, his ideas on that. But let us talk about the pivot that you've done then, because obviously there was a time where you were scrambling around what to do, and then you got yourself together and you kind of got a strategy and a pivot. Talk to us about that. Your first event was last weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the slowest pivoter in the whole of the world, but you know, like obviously the first month was sorting out the business, and then we stripped the team right back. And I am much better working with people than sat behind a laptop for sure. So what I didn't want to do is, I noticed straight away a lot of event agencies, you know, were doing the virtual experience and webinars, etc. And I have always had to be hugely passionate about what I do, and I couldn't say, oh, we're going to do virtual events just to tick a box and get some extra revenue, because it wouldn't have been authentic. So myself and the team spent a lot of time with our partners we work with, researching virtual events and how they would work, and trying to understand what could we bring, because Make Events has always been about creating the ultimate experience. So how could we bring people together that would feel as engaged and that they'd had an experience online as we would in a live space? Because taking away so many of the senses by being in this environment, that the senses that we are experiencing have to be heightened to make this, you know, to be a Make Events experience. So we then all went to a virtual conference, which is Rachel Hollis, who's like a motivational speaker in America. We all went. It was 8 hours worth of content, and we were so chuffed because we realised the way all the platforms she'd used had been and it was global, all the platforms we've been researching and all the things that I'd wanted to do. Like, we're quite well known for all our gifting and things like that we could do digitally. So once we'd done that, which was about 3 weeks ago, as a team, we were like, right, we know we can do this. So we then got the opportunity to do a charity event for Seashell Trust last Saturday. So we did Strictly Lockdown quiz. We had celebrity endorsement, celebrity host, and we ran it from, you know, live, pre-recorded, so all the mediums. Everything. We have to be able to do something that's over and above this environment and the Zoom environment. There's no point in doing it otherwise. So we've done that. And then we've also looking at corporate gifting, so very bespoke, super cool. Another brand value is magic touches, and we've always had tangible pockets full of wow in each event. So we're now kind of doing those for clients straight to their door. So it might be a make it better pack, which is really bespoke and branded, that people can gift their clients and teams with. And then also our studio that we've always had, which is graphic design, animation, artwork, video, photography. There's still a massive need for that. And then we're going to launch the HM Events brand a bit quicker than we were going to. Don't want to bore you too much, but yeah, I feel like I've been super slow. But at the same time, and I don't know if other businesses are feeling this, shrinking my team to keep costs down so we can keep alive for as long as possible. But at the same time, when you're getting a new idea off the ground, you need people. So it's that fine balance of what do you do.
On a positive note, you have had some inquiries in the last week or two as a result.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're pitching. I think we've got about 5 live inquiries for virtual events who are like, yeah, because I think the big companies are scared of the tech side. So we definitely can support on that. And then they know what their message is and how they would run a live event, but they're not quite sure how to bring that onto this platform and to get the engagement and to get people coming, getting people to accept the invitation basically and then stay online. And on Saturday, we had 300 households booked. I think the engagement stayed at 275 for 2 hours. That's really good stats, but that's because the content was good and it was fast paced and it used loads of different mediums.
Yeah. Shaun, we'll come on to how you see the landscape in a sec, but we can't not talk about your pivot, which was pretty significant. Tell us about how that just closed down and all of a sudden you're building a hospital.
Just the preamble to that was we were told by government, of course, that we all had to start working from home. But as an event business, a venue, you don't work from home as a venue. You work out with the laptops and all of the equipment that they needed in order to be able to work from home. We'd effectively closed down the venue. Just our control room was the only thing that was left going on. Everything had been switched off and we were expecting it to be, closed down for, probably a couple of months, maybe something like that. I got a phone call from initially somebody in the council that says, there's a guy from the NHS needs to have a chat with you. Can I give him your number? And I said, yeah, no problem. And literally it was a sort of a Thursday late morning, I think, and I had a call with one of the senior team at NHS England, and they said, look, we're assessing suitable sites for temporary hospitals. We want to come and have a look at your place. We've got the army ready. We want to come this afternoon. I was away from the office because we were closed, so I went into the office and we met with initially a team of about 6 or 7 people from the army, and they did a recce. These are the guys that go out. And in fact, to be fair to the team that was involved, these were very experienced people. There was some that have been involved in setting up field hospitals over in Sierra Leone, dealt with the Ebola crisis, lots and lots of logistical experience. The Royal Engineers were there, as were the medical corps. So these were very capable people. Came in, had a look. Actually, didn't really know the venue other than what it looked like from the outside. As soon as they came in, they were quite taken by the prospect of how the venue works. And of course, because we're an exhibition and event center, we've got all the stuff that they needed. We've got power, we've got water, we've got drain. We can deploy it everywhere throughout the venue relatively seamlessly. Although little did we know the amount of building work that then went on inside, but we'll come back to that in a moment. But then we had this really crazy weekend because we had to effectively gear up over the course of a period of time from sort of Thursday through to the following Monday, where we were going from zero to basically full on in that space of time. And what was interesting for myself and two or three of my team that were actually directly involved in that was the simple things to begin with were what was important. All of a sudden you had 150 people coming to the venue that needed to work. They needed to set up offices. They needed to do presentations. They needed desks. They needed Wi-Fi. They needed power. They needed feeding potentially. But we'd closed the venue down, so none of that stuff was open. So we had to sort of scramble around to get everything back up and running. And our job initially was actually creating the environment to enable that project team to get working. And we went from initially 6 or 7 people, to that Monday or Tuesday, we were up to about 150, 160. By the Wednesday, so about a week after that initial call, we were now at 500 people working 24 hours a day. And it was look, we could do a week of webinars on how that project was undertaken. But the NHS has a machine that they kind of deploy because, of course, they're dealing with building hospitals, managing hospitals, they're dealing with estates, they're dealing with facilities all the time. And in the same way that we work with an event organizer, our job as the venue was about facilitation. It was about providing them the environment to allow them to do their job. So they'd appointed the main contractor, they'd appointed the subcontractors, they'd appointed all of the people that were going to be involved in laying the flooring and stuff like that. And what was interesting, and if I just pause for a second, when all of this unfolded, you know, the events industry was absent from any of the definitions that the government was talking about in terms of businesses that couldn't do this and couldn't do that. When they announced the package of measures, the event industry was not there. Event facilities, venues were not there. So could we get rates relief? Could we qualify for the furlough scheme? It wasn't clear. Yeah, it was quite interesting and ironic that it was the events industry that ends up being at the forefront of the response to COVID, because it was our spaces. And a lot of the people that were involved in, you know, building the temporary structures inside the venue for the hospital, not necessarily in Manchester because that was a different company, but certainly in Birmingham and in Excel, they are event industry contractors. So it was our industry once again that had come in and helped to create those facilities. And then in terms of the workers inside, it was the people that were volunteering and looking for temporary work opportunities in cleaning, hospitality, portering, all of that. They were event people. They were people that would otherwise be service industry staff or working as cleaners with us or working as event support, you know. So it was fascinating how we were so missed from the beginning. But in the end, we became part of the solution. And it was, the process was managed by effectively the military, although there's a technicality because Deloitte was involved, if you like, as an overall project management facility. But like I say, 500 people working 24 hours a day, probably about 9 or 10 major contractors involved in facilitating the reconstruction. And what they did, you'll have all seen the video. I think people watching will have seen the video that you posted, Holly, which thank you for that. But I mean, it just an amazing transformation. Every surface was pretty much covered with new flooring. Existing flooring was taking up. Temporary walls were built. There was a bit of discussion about whether the facility needed oxygen or not, and I won't go into the detail as to why that was. In the end, the oxygen was installed. That was a big, and anyone that sees the venue now, you'll see that there's 2 large oxygen tanks at the rear of the venue that's feeding the forced oxygen into the facility. Additional shower blocks were installed both internally and externally. I mean, we see transformations every day when it comes to how events rebuild their facilities, but this was just off the scale.
How long was it? From taking the call to opening, what was that time period? Weeks?
Just over 2 weeks. It was about 2 weeks and 3 or 4 days. We handed over the facility on Easter Sunday. So that was midnight Easter Sunday. It technically became a hospital. So that was the 12th. We started in earnest on about the 26th, 27th, something like that. So yeah, just over 2 weeks. I mean, some things that you know will stick with me. One was, you know, the army would come and they would be in their full camo gear, and they'd be walking around the venue in camo gear, yet with a high vis top on, which I thought was somewhat strange. So that was good. But the other really interesting thing was we started out with the construction and with managing 500 people in the space. We were doing social physical distancing. So the way that we set up the catering points, hospitality points, the way that we reconfigured our auditorium in terms of capacity, that was in tune with physical distancing measures, which the army initially instigated and then we supported. But we developed the queuing systems. We developed the protocols for how large groups of people, 500 people, could get fed in a lunch hour, how you could present to, you know, 250 people in an environment that was safe and met all of those measures. So we actually had a real immersion into how that might work. And we'll come on to talk about what the future looks like. And I think that the challenge with some of those measures is that they are not compatible with the spirit and the ethos of what live events are about. And so it's clear that whilst when we return to normal activity, there's going to be a transition period immediately post-COVID to some point in the future where things are kind of normal again. And in that period, we're going to see measures that reference physical distancing, that reference the cleaning regime, maybe temperature checks, all those kinds of stuff. And I think the clever bit for us creatively is how we, as an industry, embrace those measures and make it an environment that people feel confident in, feel safe in, and importantly, to your point, Holly, that companies feel happy enough and prepared enough to say, yeah, I accept those measures, and therefore I'm happy for my employees or my team to come into that environment. And so I think that's the job now that as an industry, we're all facing: hospitality industry, the events industry, the venue industry, a lot of work going into those protocols to come up with that set of standards that we're looking for.
I think it's just worth noting as well, I did an event last night with PA Network, which I've sat on the board of for a number of years, and there's a number of PAs there from, the big four, your big brands that you would know, and a lot of them not talking about returning to the office till September. Companies, we have all learned certain benefits to working at home, but yeah, because of the measures that need to go in place, and because they can't work at full capacity in the office, they're kind of delaying it till we know more, which is interesting.
Yeah, we've actually had a question, Shaun, just to wrap that part up. What was it like working with the NHS and local authority?
Yeah, so really quite fascinating. The facility is run by Manchester Foundation Trust hospitals. That they ultimately are responsible for it, and they appointed a senior team. There is a chap that does a lot of work in social and healthcare in Manchester. Professor Michael McCourt is the chief exec of the Manchester Nightingale. He's got an exec team that run the facility. They all effectively work up into Manchester Foundation Trust. In terms of the facility itself and how it worked, they run that. In terms of our role working into that, we work with NHS England. So the conversations I have are with the chief financial officer of NHS England and 2 or 3 of his senior team that are responsible for managing facilities and the environment. But what I will tell you is that in our industry, in the events industry, we're a kind of can-do, get stuff done industry. We're faced with a problem, we take it on, we fix it. The NHS, quite rightly, has a set of procedures and, if you like, a playbook as to how things happen. And it was really interesting to see the dynamic between the army and the NHS. And this is not a criticism, by the way, it's just an observation, whereby because of the consequences of healthcare, the NHS has to do things absolutely by the book in a certain way. Whereas the army, and their mantra is, you can have as many plans as you like, but once the first shot is fired, they all get thrown out the window. And the coming together of the army pushing the pace and the resolution towards, we've just got to get this done, and the NHS, which is saying, well, we've actually got certain criteria to meet, we've got procedures to fit into, we've got sign off, we've got authority, we've got all of this stuff. And it was an incredible lesson in project management when you're dealing with literally the 2 extremes of how things come together. And in our industry, we're used to, as I said a minute ago, just getting stuff done. We're empowered, we make decisions, we make things happen. That was a very different environment when we were building a hospital, quite rightly as well. Yeah. To be fair.
So obviously, Holly's talked about her events July and August now cancelling out and having nothing in the book really now. That's guaranteed. Obviously, you've got a hospital there, so at some stage they're going to come back to you and say, hopefully we don't need it. Hopefully there's no second. What does your future look like? Well, I guess we are having to base that on that the hospital at some point is not necessary anymore. What does it look like for you in August,
so
September?
We're actively engaged in conversation with the NHS about their intentions. You can imagine it is a complicated situation. It's political, government is involved, NHS is involved, local authority is involved, the whole shooting match. The fact of the matter is this, that we are, the way our contract is written, they are due to be leaving the facility in July. We are decommissioning the hospital in August, and we are expecting to be back in business in September. Mm-hmm. That's what the contract says. What do I think is actually going to happen? Well, I think the environment at the moment is particularly challenging for large-scale events as they are currently set out in our diary to go ahead as normal. And the discussions that we're involved in with some of our clients is, if you were to run your event, how would you run your event? What were the changes that you'd have to make? How could you fit in the new spacing, safety, hygiene, security regimes and protocols that you would need to do. And every event is different. Every discussion is unique. So we're working on that at the moment. And of course, there's the prospect of whether or not the NHS decides to extend. So I'm hopeful that within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll have clarity from the NHS in terms of their intentions. I think that is then going to determine what happens to the venue. I mean, clearly, the health priority will take precedence, and therefore, the government, the NHS, will decide the requirement that's needed for Nightingales across the board, and then that will then flow down to us. Today, we're the only Nightingale hospital that's operational. All right, we only have a handful of live patients inside the venue. I know that the medical team is talking to the other trusts around the region about the capacity that they might be looking at. That will have an influence, I think, on things as well for us. But look, we're when all this started, we had an incredible amount of pride that it was our venue and our space that was going to be a part of this solution, because in the absence of not being able to run events, what a fantastic use of this institution in the city to be for another chapter in its illustrious story to be recorded. But my team, Manchester Central is in the business of running events. We generate somewhere in the region of £150 million worth of economic positive impact into the city every year. A number of jobs, thousands of jobs rely not just on the business that we do in Central, but also business events across the whole city. It's an incredible part of our economy. So our motivation is to get the venue back and to be running events again. But we will do that in tune with the health priorities that are set out by the NHS and the government. What I'm trying to do is to work as quickly as possible to get that certainty so that we can then set out a calendar that says, right, this is what the immediate future looks like. We'll see where we go from there. It's been, it's something that it's a fascinating part of our history. It's incredibly immense amount of pride to be involved in it, but we are an events venue, and we see events as part of the economic recovery and societal recovery as well. All of the things that Holly does with her touches of magic and the way that people come together, that is so important. And I think that the sooner we can start to see events happening in whatever shape and size, the first event that happens will lead to the next event and will lead to the next event. And the first one will be small and it'll have a few restrictions around it. The second one will be slightly bigger with slightly fewer restrictions. The third one, and so on and so on and so on. And what all of this, as brilliant as these webinars and this video conferencing virtual webinars have been, and hats off to you, Holly, for putting all of your energy into creating, your version of what this will be. It proves actually that there is no substitute for getting together in real life. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what keeps my team going, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah. The future landscape, Holly, obviously how do you think, with the pivot you've done and the virtual events that you're putting on, how do you think, and again, I'll ask you the same question in a second, Shaun, how do you think the two will work together going forward, i.e. the virtual and the physical event space? So
there's definitely going to be a longevity with this. And again, one of the reasons that we decided to explore it, because for me, if it was just a short-term measure, then I wouldn't have that much, like I say, enthusiasm about it. But I think this is part of the events tapestry now. So we're seeing clients saying that they will potentially retain 30 to 40% of what would have been my business essentially live as virtual. and they'll do a lot of that internally. They won't need an events agency's help for that. So that change of dynamic is going to affect the venue industry and then the agency industry for sure. Then I think what we'll probably see is a little bit of a hybrid. So I think that there's going to be a nervousness about bringing large amounts of people together. So for example, where we might have done an event at Man Central for 1,000 people, we might now be saying, well, that space can only take 500. So what does that look like? So is it going to be that geographically, when a company wants to bring a large group of people together, they will stagger them over the country, have some live content delivered simultaneously with maybe the main keynote or whatever that looks like streamed in? I mean, when I worked at AstraZeneca years ago, that would be something we did anyway. So for example, if we reached a milestone in drug discovery, we might celebrate that milestone across multiple sites and live stream so we could all see each other, but they would all be having an identical event at the same time. And there's quite a lot of joy and like celebration within that framework. So that's how I see things working. It's also going to bring opportunities in the sense of, like, I can even use Make Events as an example. I've always wanted to have a particular speaker from Starbucks from the US come to speak to the team, but it was cost prohibitive for us. Had I ever considered that they would get as good an experience if that speaker broadcasted live to us? No. So that brings opportunity in that sense. But I think what it's going to do is affect, for us certainly, the way that we plot our pipeline and our revenue and our profit margins, because, you know, Shaun and I had the discussion the other day that does it mean that room hire is going to go up? Is day delegate going to go up? Because they can't sustain as many people at the same time, but we'll probably need the same amount of service staff to manage the additional measures that are going to have to be taken, such as food service, drink service security. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how it all plays out.
It is. I've got a client that was in the fastest growth at 100, and you get invited to Richard Branson's house. So we went to his house. It was like a year ago now. That's flown, but Richard wasn't there. He was on a screen. Whilst it was okay, it wasn't quite. Richard was there, and we didn't quite get to sit and chat to him. So I think there's always going to be, and I'm pretty certain Shaun's going to back this up, there's always going to be that need to be face to face, and that live event space is never going to go away.
100%.
But I do think you're learning that there's going to be a bit more of an amalgamation and actually an enhancement of the overall experience by plugging the two, the digital, the virtual, and the actual live event space together.
Yeah, I think so. And you know, there's a story, and that's very much part of our brand, which is if any of you read the book Onward by Howard Schultz, who was the original founder CEO of Starbucks. And when they were going through a bad patch, Starbucks several years ago, his stakeholders said, you know, you're not doing your leadership summit. We're not investing money in a big live event when the company's struggling. And he was so passionate that if he wanted to deliver this new strategy, he absolutely had to bring all these people together in one space. And he went against all the advice, and he had this massive leadership summit to deliver the new strategy. And it was the start of Starbucks' upturn again. And so I do believe, as Shaun says, government and NHS restrictions, you know, we because everybody has had to change the strategy. The strategy that you had at the start of the year is completely changed now. Now, to really embed that into people's minds, your team, can that be done in this environment? Because actually, you know, we need people so digitally fatigued that I think, you know, maybe there won't be all bells and whistles that we used to. Maybe they won't look as fancy, but I definitely think that getting to people together and delivering that message is going to happen.
Shaun, how do you see the two dovetailing together to create better experiences?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Holly said. I think if you take sporting events, right, there's a value about being there, whether it's, you know, boxing, football, you know, athletics games, you know, there's something about being there, but equally there's this massive audience that then tunes in, as whether it's televised or whatever. And I think that where the opportunity exists now for, you know, event organizers is that sort of hybrid of, you know, you still run the main event in a physical space. You bring people together, but people actually want to be there. If they can't be there in real life, then there's a way that they can tune in. And I think that technology will improve. Part of our responsibility as a venue is enablement, as I've said a couple of times. So that means that I've got to have good technical capability to allow someone like Holly to deliver the production values that she needs to deliver, so that when you've got someone on the screen, it actually works. You know, the problem, I was on a conference this week, and one of the problems you had is you had 5 or 6 different contributors from different parts of the world, and they were only as good as their own individual Wi-Fi. So you've got someone trying to chair a panel discussion, and you've got someone that's literally on a dial-up, you know, and you've got somebody else that's got the full HD studio. So I think part of what we will see our venue changing is, I think that space will be allocated over to broadcast and production, and to allow the event that's taking place inside the facility to manifest itself, you know, over the digital channels, and probably multiple channels as well, so that if you tune into a particular conference, business event, you know, today when you go to a conference physically, you can choose to go down different streams. You could have the technology stream, or the innovation stream, or the customer service stream. I think you'll have the same thing digitally. And so I see a great future. And plus, when you've only got a digital presence, monetizing it for organizers is very difficult, because you're relying on sponsorship. You know, it's very difficult to get people to pay to sign up to stuff unless you're doing training where there's an accreditation at the end of it. So it's very difficult to create just a pure online event that commercially makes sense. However, the audiences are enormous. So you're talking 5,000, 6,000, 20,000, 100,000 people that could potentially tune into a particular event. So the clever bit is going to be that hybrid of how you monetize that massive audience that will last for longer than just the period of the event, but still deliver a real life experience that is great value, that actually makes people want to go back there next year. And, you know, you see South by Southwest on the telly and you say, I want to go there, you know, or you see Glastonbury in festivals, you watch it on BBC and it's fantastic, but actually you still rather be there, because actually that's part of what the experience is all about. So I think I can see the job that we're going to play in this, in helping that happen. I think that the virtual experience has highlighted some of the flaws that these facilities have, and the weaknesses that exist in if this is just the future, it's not a great future. But this, coupled with real life events, I think is going to be tremendous. And, you know, where we are now, where we're bombarded with daily news briefings, and it's the media competing with each other to make us more miserable than we already are. Yeah, and it's so difficult sometimes to see what it's going to be like in 6 months' time. But let's remember how quickly this happened. And I think if you take an idea of that pace, the speed with which we come out of this, something that seems impossible today happens next week. And then in 3 weeks' time, it's just considered normal. And yep, we have to watch out this weekend, bank holiday. We're going to see a lot of people potentially pushing their luck a little bit, which might not be good. But, you know, we've come so far. I think that people are kind of now in it for the final furlong. I think, you know, if it's only a few more weeks, let's just stick with it. And then if we start to see Italy coming out, we start to see Spain relax, we start to get the right news stories to say that actually, as the shops opened, it didn't result in a massive increase in new cases. And I think that is that's the pathway that we'll have. Yes, we're going to have a transition period where it's going to be different. Yes, there's going to be a long-term legacy for this as well. And you know what? There's going to be some people, you know, that aren't going to do anything until there is a vaccine and they've got it and they're proved to be okay. And we're just going, that's the environment that we're working. But we are nothing if we're not innovative, creative, and energetic. And that's why I'm positive that we will get out of this. And as difficult as it seems today to see it, it's going to be honest before we know it.
Yeah, I'm going to put you.
I've got a bloody hospital in my venue, so I'm So,
I'm going to put you both on. Yeah, I'm going to put you both on the spot a little bit now, because the three of us talked about what you just said yesterday, Shaun, about various levels of confidence, and that's what it's all going to be. And we talked about at the end of January, if somebody said your venue would have been shut down, or a hospital, or Holly, you know, the whole event, every event in the calendar would be cancelled for the rest of the year. We wouldn't have believed it, and in many ways we wouldn't have accepted it, but you learn to accept it as you move on. So confidence starts coming back. I'll carry on with you first, Shaun. How do you see and then we're going to come to the end to keep it within an hour. I think we are going to overspill 5 minutes. I think we could have done 2 or 3 hours on this, but yeah, how do you, I'm putting you both on the spot, how do you personally look at it now from your perspective, Shaun, see us coming out of this in terms of speed, pace, and how are you preparing for it as well from a sort of health and safety, what you're already doing?
Yeah, look, it's a big answer, but what I see happening, I see events starting. I see events starting in a small scale. You know, for me, the restart of the hospitality industry in terms of bars and restaurants is a key catalyst for us, because it's an indicator for the social aspects that applies to events. So I think those guys are going to be out there in a few weeks testing the water with how restaurants can restart, potentially how pubs can start in July, maybe. I think that will be a critical learning for us. I think we'll start to see smaller events. I think if I look overseas, actually in China, in Korea, in other jurisdictions, we're already seeing events restart with different measures. I think that will continue. I think there was a motor show, the first major event in China was the Hunan Motor Show, 60,000 people. They all got their temperature checked, they all wore face masks, and then they all completely ignored social distancing once they were in the venue. But the venue did its part by actually putting out the protocols that people should follow. I think that we will continue to look at the health and safety measures that we can implement that are feasible and realistic for our industry. Some detract too much from the experience, and I think in those circumstances, people will say, you know what, if that's what we have to do, then I don't want to do it. I'll wait until I can do it properly. And I think we will see that, to be fair. But you know, you can't keep the industry down, and so we'll see small events start. And once an event of 50 people starts, the next one will be 75, and then it'll be 100, and then it'll just go and go and go. And we are only in May. You know, we've only been in lockdown for 8 weeks. We're talking about September, October. We're talking months away. You know, as soon as we get to October, November, the only story that people are going to be talking about is Brexit again. So we should look forward to that, because
we missed it.
Because you know, no one will be worried about the virus. We'll all be worried about Brexit again. So you know, and that's the media story too. So that will, you know, look, I'm joking a little bit, but it will actually help with the confidence, because you know, a lot of the medical enhancements around the vaccine and the treatments will have advanced as well. And like I say, what seems impossible today will be normal in 3 weeks' time.
Holly, what do you think?
Yeah, so like I say, I have a huge belief. So if I'm going to talk personally in our business, although I've had my wobbles, as you know, Paul, and looked at various options, do I think that make events can survive? Yes, I do. I have been really clear with the teams. I'm sure all of the managers, leaders, business owners have, in that, you know, what does the organisation chart look like going forward? I can't say at this moment in time, because it will be a different business. And they're all aware of that. You know, I've kept them in the loop with everything. I think one thing that I'm reading a lot about is the incentive market, which is great for the UK actually, where incentives used to be very much about going overseas, taking people going overseas. It's going to be, and incentives will still happen because it's smaller groups. So for those of you that don't know, a sales team might be incentivized that they go on this trip of a lifetime if they hit their target. It's going to be even more prevalent to be, we're certainly looking at it, to have really clear quantitative financial targets for the whole team going forward, where sometimes maybe that wasn't our main driver. So I think incentives will come back round, and they'll be easier to manage because they're smaller groups. And the stats are saying that that's going to very much benefit the UK market. So where you might have taken 20 people over to Dubai, maybe you're taking 20 people to Soho Farmhouse, for example. So that's nice, and that's an interesting piece of the events industry for us. And I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think there is going to be that certain companies that won't do anything until the vaccine's available. And yeah, I think it's going to be a slow start, but 2 years. You know, and it seems negative, but two years from now, I would say we'll be back to where we were 100%, because if we're looking at 18 months of vaccine. So it's just about holding tight and, you know, believing, everybody listening, believing in your brand, believing in what you do, and believing in your team, and offering them a way forward.
The large majority of people, we did say we keep to an hour, but 98% of people are still listening. So we're just going to keep going for another 5 minutes. There's no point.
Yeah.
There's no drop off here.
Oh, is it that good?
Swimming on today, though. Surely that's gonna.
So I'm going to keep going. If you've got any questions, now's the time. Put them through, and we'll try and do a few questions till about 10 past. But I'm going to put you back on the spot a bit, Holly, because you mentioned 2 years, and that seems too far away from me. When do you honestly believe now? When do you think, in your heart of hearts, you're going to be back putting on an event, and not a virtual event, an event?
Yeah. I want to say December, but the reason that I'm hesitant is, and Shaun and I have had this conversation, I think the conference and awards will come back because it will be easier to manage. So, like, for those of you not in the event industry, it will be easy to manage that social distancing because, say we have 10 to round table now, maybe it's now 6. It tends to be formal catering, and so we can manage that through table service and bar service to the table. So I think where we're going to struggle is that celebration market, because you can't put on a party and say everybody stand 2 meters apart. I mean, you can't have like dots on a dance floor. Do you know what I mean? And yes, there will be, you'll put on a conference and the social distancing will get ignored, but there will be visible and formal measures that we can take. I think it would be very hard to put on a big party with loads of alcohol involved that you could show your health and safety department and risk assessment that everyone was going to be 2 meters apart, because it's impossible. So although I want to say December, is it going to be smaller groups, formal lunches, rather than these big parties?
Shaun, I'll
say that we'll do some live events before the end of the year, if that makes you happy.
Shaun, I'm going to go more with you. I honestly think what's going to happen is I think the advancement in the testing is going to be rapid. And I think you're going to be able to, I think we've got to get on aeroplanes at some point soon. And I think the only way to do that is to walk on an aeroplane knowing you haven't got the coronavirus. I think it's as simple as that. And I think that's probably the same to a degree for large scale events. And I think it will be as simple as they've announced this morning, or I think it was last night. And the big discussion point today is, swab testing and get your result within 20 minutes. And I can see events going ahead September-ish of a reasonable size and a reasonable scale. But you'll have to walk in and have your 20-minute swab test. That's how I think it's going to be. What do you guys think, Shaun? What do you think, Shaun, on that, on the testing side?
Yeah, look, I think that's the one thing that counters, if you like, coronaphobia, the fear of the virus as much as the virus itself. And that will be, for various reasons, either personal choice or corporate policy. That will be one of the reasons why the attendance is suppressed. So I think that I hope that the pace at which whether it's the vaccine or treatments can be developed actually continues to go at the rate it's going at the moment, and that we're able to put this one behind us. I mean, the thing is, though, if you look at things like SARS, there still isn't a particular vaccine for SARS. SARS is still around, but it's just gone into the background. And you do wonder where COVID will go of its natural course. At the moment, clearly, we've never seen anything like it. So I think it's difficult, and I'm not going to attempt to try and predict anything around those lines. But there are so many variables that could take place. Our job is to do whatever measures are feasible and practical to ensure that you can give confidence to people to want to come into a space, because the last thing you want to do is to encourage people to get into space and then for them to feel that they're at risk or anything. And of course, listen, we have to bear this in mind as well as organized, particularly when it comes to public events. You're under scrutiny, right? You put on a space, you're under scrutiny, both as the organizer and as the venue. The people will be there watching, and the world we live in, people will be looking for flaws and failures in process. And so we've got to do something which we can deliver consistently, something which is not too oppressive, if you like, that it actually ruins the whole experience anyway. So, whether it's temperature checks, whether it's the track and trace technology, which seems to be getting a bit of momentum, especially here in Manchester as well. And these things are going to come to the fore over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Interesting, like if we I'm just looking on the screen, and one of our viewers, Imogen, has asked us a couple of questions under the Q&A. And we're just talking about these measures now, actually. But yeah, I think there will be additional measures. I think things like access control, flow direction for exhibitions, capacity. What we're talking about is crowd density. So the numbers of people in a particular space and how you arrange that space to manage crowd density. You know,
what's your gut feel on that? What's your gut feel on like a percentage wise of a capacity? That have you got any idea?
Yeah, 2 meters, which is the number everyone's talking about at the moment, is unviable. It just doesn't work, and it won't work, because if you try and implement it, it just won't happen. You know, I think a meter is different. I think that the prospect of wearing face masks in gatherings, I think that will be part of that transition period as well. As you know, as difficult as that might seem, I suspect that may be in the same way. To go on a flight, you'll have to wear a mask. It could well be that we see stuff like that. We may be checking temperatures as people come into the venue. We're actually looking at automated camera scanning as well, so that you can actually monitor large groups of people coming into a space that is riddled with technical issues, policy issues, GDPR issues, and everything else you can imagine as well. So it's not as simple as sticking up a camera and away you go. You've got to think of all the other stuff that goes with it. The clever bit is, in all of these extra measures, if it adds more cost and it detracts from the experience, then actually it reduces the number of people that want to be involved in it, and therefore the commercial viability is challenged. And that's the clever bit for us as an industry. It's finding that pathway that says it's still commercially viable, but actually it's safe enough. And that's why I think we've got this transition period where we've really got to be clever, where we've got to find ways that actually work. And then as soon as we start to demonstrate that, I see a process happening where events get bigger, restrictions get smaller, normal life, whatever that is, starts to return to the fore. And then before we know it, actually, we're back in a place. And you're right, Holly, it could be 2 years before we see the volumes that we were seeing. When I look at my 5-year plan, it looks very different now from the 5-year plan that I had in December last year.
Yeah.
But that's just, and I can't change that. So I've got to recalibrate the business accordingly, and to all intents and purposes, start again. Yes. But we will start again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Holly, last question.
Yeah.
I'm joining 2 questions here from the Q&A. Do you think we're going to have virtual event fatigue by the end of the year? And another question relating to that is, how do you keep being innovative then to keep it being experiential?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's getting digital fatigue now. Not so much people that are furloughed, but for those of us still working, you know, I know certainly I'm spending 6 to 8 hours a day on Zoom, and then I have family and friends in the evening. I just can't, because I'm just sick of it. I think it's about engagement. I think it's about engagement and that experiential element that an agency will bring to a virtual event, because it needs to be, and I go back to what I said, it's got to be so much more punchier and exciting than this experience for it to engage people and want them to come. And I think it needs to be married with tangible assets as well. So, for example, we were talking to a company about a product launch yesterday to do virtually, and I just said to them, I just don't feel like what you were going to do in the live environment, which was drinks, canapes and food, is not cutting it in a virtual experience. We need to make it much more of an, you know, content driven, you know, with speakers and panelists, which you would never have launched that product that way before. And I think that there is going to be, let's even say a company says, yes, I am going to do my company conference. There's going to be a percentage of the staff that will not want to go. And so then you've still got to manage that and offer virtual alternative, because we have to manage people's anxieties as well. And I think one thing I didn't get to mention that I do think it's worth people remembering is, so before all this happened, we do our own internal comms conference because we've got a massive passion in practicing what we preach. And we did that conference last year. It was called Let's Grow at the Lowry Hotel. And we filmed the entire conference as we're filming this webinar now. And the content that we've got out that forms part of our staff induction. So people need to think about it cleverly and go, okay, right, so I'm doing this conference. It's going to be virtual. What can I do with this content after? Don't just think about it one day. So we make sure that, like as a small example, part of the conference last year was the history of make events. Well, that was filmed, and that means every single new starter hears exactly the same message that the team have got. So I think it's like not thinking of your event as just one day that was live. You've got this live experience, this virtual, and what do you do with all that content after, either to communicate further with your customers, your social media presence, or your teams.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for that, Holly. So thanks, Holly. Thanks, Shaun, for coming on, and thank you to everybody who's stuck it out with us for an hour and 15 minutes, which is nearly everybody that started the journey with us. So there must be some decent content in there for you all. Today, Shaun, you did touch on is the 22nd of May. It is 3 years since the Manchester tragedy, and obviously 22 people lost their lives. I'm not sure whether there is a minute's silence. I tried to find it online, couldn't find anything.
I think it's 2 o'clock.
Okay, 2 o'clock. So, you know, all of us should really give some time to remember those that are no longer with us. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And thanks again, Holly and Shaun.
Paul, thank you for facilitating. Fantastic job. Hey, Holly, just one bit of good news, of course, out of all of this, is that in the absence of a 2020 Downtown in Business Awards, we get to keep ours for another year.
Oh, do we? Excellent. I'll go and dust off the award. Oh, thanks so much, Paul. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.